Have you got a lot of what you wanted, but something feels off? And there's probably no particular crisis for you, but you just expect it to feel a bit more. Maybe more happiness, more fulfillment, maybe more like you derived. In this video, I'm going to show you why that happens to almost every ambitious professional. And it comes down to a single mistake most of us make without realizing it. And once you see it, the way that you think about your career is going to change completely. So my name's Mostyn Wilson. I spent 22 years at KPMG, one of the world's biggest professional services firms. I made partner, I was the COO and head of people for a large part of the UK firm. And since leaving, I've worked with hundreds of senior professionals, including partners, FTSE 100 executives, and this pattern comes up constantly. People who got exactly what they were aiming for, but still feel like something's off. Because there's a specific reason this keeps happening. And it affects almost every high-achieving person that I've worked with. And it's so obvious once you see it. Because here's how most of us build our careers. We pick goals that make sense. A specific salary, a well-known company, a senior role. And we chase those things sometimes for years, sometimes for decades. Because that's the normal version of success. And because those goals are tangible, they're easy to aim for. But the real reason you want them is emotional. You're actually chasing a feeling. And that's where the problem starts. Most people never separate those two things. They say, I want to make it to the executive level, but what they actually want is proof that they're exceptional. That's their emotional outcome. Or they say, I want to earn $500,000, but what they actually want is security. Or they say, I want to work at that particular company. But underneath that, the emotional outcome is that they want other people to be impressed by them. So most people never consider the emotional outcomes because the tangible goals are much easier to measure, they're easier to explain, and they're easier to chase. So that's what gets all the attention. So people spend 10, 15, 20 years optimizing for the surface layer, the titles, the salary, the brand name, without ever actually asking, what do I want to feel? And that would be fine if the surface layer always delivered the feelings that we want, but they almost never do, unless you just get lucky, or at least not completely. And this is the part that catches out some of the smartest, most outwardly successful people. So let me show you what's actually going on. There are three parts to this. So the first part is why this visible layer falls short. We chase tangible goals because they're obvious and they're socially approved. It's normal to have a goal to get that next promotion, the next step up, or a longer-term goal to become the CEO. But it's not normal to have a career goal that says, I want to feel significant. And here's the thing, those tangible goals often do deliver something real. You get the title, and yes, there's a degree of status. You get the salary, and yes, it does create some security. But those emotional payoffs are only part of the picture, because once you've got them, you start to notice that they're actually far from the whole picture for you. You also need things like autonomy, purpose, freedom, or I think for more and more of us, a real sense that what you're doing every day actually matches who you are. We want to feel more alignment there. And those sorts of things don't come automatically with the title or the salary. They have to be designed for separately, which almost nobody does, which gives you a great opportunity to do so. So part two is all about incomplete emotional outcomes. And let me give you an example. So I worked with the CFO of a major listed financial services business, obviously one of the most senior people in the company, status, respect, influence. But when we sat down and looked at his diary, he had almost no autonomy. He had governance meetings he couldn't skip, he had regulator meetings he had to attend, meetings with investors, one-to-ones with his team that were locked in. So week after week, his time was almost entirely spoken for. Yes, he had the seniority, but he had very little control over what he actually did with his days. And even worse, when he looked at his home life, it was the same story. So between family commitments and the overspill from his work, his true discretionary time came down to a few hours a week. And this is a person with the status, the security, and the recognition, so all the things that you'd expect at his level. But things like autonomy, control, freedom, things that he really wanted, they were completely absent. And I see this pattern a lot. A partner at a law firm with every credential that you could want, but no freedom to take a Thursday afternoon off. A marketing director that everyone in the company respects, but who privately told me she hasn't felt genuinely excited about her work in 3 years. The tangible markers delivered some of what they needed, but there was a whole set of emotional outcomes that they'd never actually accounted for. And those missing pieces are exactly why our work often doesn't feel right for us. So if the tangible goals only solve part of the problem, how do you figure out what's actually missing for you? And this is where most people get stuck. They know something's off, but they have no idea what to do about it. So part three is all about identifying your emotional outcomes. And this is a step where most people go wrong. If I asked you right now, what do you want from your career? Most of you would answer with job titles or companies or salary levels. Those are the external markers, the tangible outcomes. But it's the layer underneath, the emotional outcomes that we've been talking about, which actually determine whether your career feels right. So let me show you what I mean. If someone says, I want to earn 250K. Why? Well, it's almost never for the money itself. It's what that money represents. Security, the feeling of being safe, or maybe significance. Maybe it's proof that you've made it to a level that matters to you. Or if someone says that they want to work at a top-tier firm, and then you dig into it, and what they really want is for other people to respect them. The firm is just the fastest route to hopefully getting that feeling. I worked with someone last year who kept saying he wanted to move overseas. Lifestyle, better weather, all of that. But what he was actually after was reinvention. He wanted a chance to become a different version of himself, somewhere nobody had a fixed idea of who he was. So that was the emotional outcome, whereas moving overseas was just a tangible outcome. And when I went through this exercise for myself before I left KPMG a few years ago, I realized that there were 3 emotional outcomes that I wanted most from my work. I wanted autonomy, to choose what I worked on, where I worked, and who I worked with. I wanted purpose, a feeling that I was making a real positive difference in people's lives. And I wanted recognition. And that was both appreciation from the people that I was working with, but also financial recognition too. And once I could see those 3 things quite clearly, the decisions that I needed to make to get them became much more obvious to me. I stopped looking at the next logical career step, and I started asking which path would actually give me all of those 3. And that's what led me to build Atomic Ambition. And I can tell you those 3 emotional outcomes are exactly what I get now. I choose the people I work with, I choose how I spend my time, and every week I see the difference that it makes for people. That's autonomy, purpose, and recognition all in one. And the reason it works is because I designed for it. I didn't chase a job title or a company name that wasn't going to work for me. I built something around the feelings that I actually wanted. So here's a perhaps more relatable example from someone that I worked with last year. So this person used to be the CFO of a biotech company. It was a role he deliberately worked his way up to, but it wasn't giving him 2 core emotional outcomes that were really important to him. And those were the ability to make a real impact on the success of the business, because for that business, the success was much more aligned to the technical development of the products. And his second area is perhaps a more unusual desired emotional outcome, which is one of humor. So the environment and culture that he was in was at odds with his more playful character, which felt really frustrating for him. And after going through this process, he's now the CFO at a big cricket club. And I caught up with him the other day, and he's absolutely loving it. He's got an ability to make a real impact on the success of the club because he's instrumental in a new franchise that they're developing. And the culture allows him to use his humorous personality to be much more effective in his role through the relationships that he's building both in and outside of the club. So on paper, yeah, he's still a CFO, but the roles couldn't be more different. So here's what I want you to do. I mean, actually do this. Don't just think about it. Get a blank page and write down the 3 feelings that you most want your work to give you. And if you're stuck, here are some examples to consider. Recognition, freedom, autonomy, joy, excitement, challenge, feeling valued, security, fulfillment, control, confidence, belonging, purpose, pride, growth, stability, creativity, trust, inspiration, satisfaction, connection, respect, motivation, and balance. Stop the video and take a look at these emotional outcomes. And once you've got your 3, score your current career against each one. Out of 10, be honest. Because if there's a gap between what you need emotionally and what your career is actually delivering, that's where your discomfort lives. And it's the first step to working out what you should do next. Because whatever you do next, which can include optimizing your current role to get more of those emotional outcomes, you need to get those scores up from where they are. Otherwise, nothing is actually going to change for you about how you feel about work. Now, you might be thinking, I can't just walk away from everything that I've built, and that's definitely not the point here. This is about taking what's working and dialing up the emotional outcomes you actually want so that things feel more complete for you. Or maybe you're thinking, I should just be grateful for what I've got. And gratitude is definitely important. The fact that you've even got options here means you're doing way better than most. But just because you're grateful, it doesn't mean it feels good to you. You can have gratitude and misalignment existing at the same time. So you can appreciate what you've achieved, but still recognize that it isn't giving you everything that you need. So try that exercise this week. Get the blank sheet of paper, write down those 3 feelings that you most want from your work and score your career against each one and see where the gap is. And that clarity alone will change how you think about your next move. It did for me, it did for the CFO I mentioned, and it's done the same for hundreds of professionals I've worked with since. But here's what I've also learned. Knowing where the gap is gets you started, but the harder question is then, what do you do about it? Especially when you've invested years in a particular career path. And if you want to make that decision easy for yourself, my Atomic Ambition program will solve it for you. It takes you from knowing that something's off to being genuinely clear and excited about what's next for you. And if that's where you are, the link's in the description. Take a quick look now.